Hey guys, it's Mrs. Cavalier. Sorry I'm gone again today. So you should have your math book. We're going to start section 1-5. It begins on page 43. So if you have your math book, please join me on page 43. If you notice, down in the bottom there's a real world link and there's this table. So we've been talking about exponents now for a while. We talked about multiplying like bases, dividing like bases, and having power to a power. Now we're going to throw negative exponents in there. So we're going to change a few things. Those rules will stay the same, but we're going to add a few things to it. So we're going to use this to kind of get an example of how negative exponents work, and then we'll go into more detail in practice. If you remember, we had a homework recently that had 10 with an exponent, and we discussed how 10 to that exponent just means that's how many zeros it has. So 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000. We have 30 as our exponent, 3 zeros. So 10 times 10, two of them, or 10 to the second power gives me 100. Exponent is 2, I have 2 zeros. 10 to the first power, I just have 10. 10 to the 0 power, I have a 0 as my exponent, so that means I have 0 zeros. So that's our first new rule. I guess we could call this rule number 4 because it's our fourth exponent rule. Any number or variable to the 0 power is 1. And we'll talk more about that next time I see you. I'm not going to get into it in order to keep the length of this video short. So continuing with our table, now we have, so if you notice here, we divided by 10, we divided by 10, we divided by 10. So I'm going to divide by 10 again, and when I do that, I get 1 divided by 10. Well, here I'm counting down 3, 2, 1, 0. So if I continue to count down, I get 10 to the negative 1. So notice, that's the same as 10 to the first, but now it's a fraction. And if you remember, that's called the reciprocal. When you have a number and then the fraction like that, that's the reciprocal of 10 is 1/10. So let's look at 10 to the negative 2. Well, I'm going to divide by 10 again. So now I'm dividing by 100. Well, 100 can be written as 10 squared. So look, that's 10 to the negative 2 is the reciprocal of 10 squared, 1/100. Or I could just write it like that. Last one, 10 to the negative third, we would divide by 10 again. So now we're dividing by 1,000, or we're dividing by 10 to the third. So notice when we have an exponent, a negative exponent, so to make a negative exponent positive, so if you take notes, maybe write this in your notes, or write it in the side of your book, or just memorize this. To make a negative exponent positive, we rewrite it as the reciprocal with a positive exponent. And I'm out of room, sorry about this, this is so sloppy. And that's stated here on page 44 in your textbook in that key concept box. Any number with a 0 exponent is 1, or any variable with a 0 exponent is 1. We have this negative exponent, so I wrote it as the reciprocal, 1/7, as a positive exponent. I have this negative n. I wrote the reciprocal of 1 over x with a positive exponent. So let's look at practice. If you'd like to follow along, I'm on page 64, example 1. So the reciprocal of 6 is 1/6, and then I have a negative 3, so that just becomes a positive 3. So 1/6 to the third. This one's not in your textbook. Same thing, the reciprocal of 4 is 1/4, and now my exponent is positive. If you think about it, if I have 4 to the 4th, that's 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. Well, the opposite of 4 is negative 4, so the opposite of multiply is divide. So this is now 1 times 4 times 4 times 4. So this bar means to divide. So the opposite of a positive is a negative. The opposite of multiply is divide. So that's essentially what we're doing here, but rather than writing it out like this, we're just going to write it with a positive exponent and the reciprocal. So a little bit funny with a variable. This is example 2 on page 44. The reciprocal of a is 1 over a, so 1 over a to the positive 5th power. So I'm going to have the sub, or we're going to do this example, just kidding. So we're going to do the reciprocal of c with a positive 7 as our exponent. So now I'm going to have the sub pause this video. When everybody's had a minute or two to answer the got it on page 44, then we will start the video up again, check our answers, and move on. So you should have had a minute to work. So this, we have 1 over 7 squared. This becomes 1 over b to the positive 4th. Anything to the 0 power is 1. That's an ugly 1, but it is a 1. And 1 over m to the positive 3rd. Continuing on, now we're working backwards. So now we have to write each fraction as an expression with a negative exponent. Our exponent cannot be negative 1. So looking at this, I have 5 to the negative 2. I did the reciprocal with a negative exponent. So when we flip it, when we make a reciprocal, our sign of our exponent changes. That's going to come into play huge in a little bit. So I could rewrite this as 36 because that's the reciprocal of 1 over 36. And we could put our negative 1 exponent in here. But the directions said we need an exponent other than negative 1. So I need to think of a number. What number times itself is 36? Well, 6 squared is 36. So I'm just going to make this a negative. So 6 to the negative 2nd power. This would cause this to be 1 over 6 squared. 6 times 6 is 36. So those things are all equal. So this guy is my answer. That's kind of confusing. So let's look at a couple more. So I'm writing this with a negative exponent. Just reciprocal and slap a negative in there. Notice here, we have a negative number. Doesn't change anything. I write the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 1 over negative 3 is just negative 3. And now instead of to the 5th power, it's to the negative 5th power. These parentheses do need to be there because that does change the value. Try the got it on page 44. It's the bottom one. Again, have the sub pause the video, and then we'll check your answers in a minute. Okay, you've had a minute to work. So this one should be 8 to the negative 3, c to the negative 5th, 27 to the negative 5th. Okay, this one was tricky. 4 can be written as 2 squared, and so then that becomes 2 to the negative 2 because we had to have an exponent other than negative 1. So if you have 4 to the negative 1st power, you're technically not incorrect, but you didn't follow the directions. Taking everything we've learned now. Now when I say simplify, that's a key to this. You must, from now on, unless the directions say, you must have a positive exponent answer to be accurate mathematically. All right, so let's look at this. So when we multiply like bases, we add exponents. 3 plus negative 5 is negative 2. Well, I have to have a positive exponent as my answer, so this becomes 1 over 5 squared. Same thing here. Adding these don't even have like bases, so I can rewrite this as 2 squared and then 3 over 8. By bringing this guy to the bottom, he became positive, and now my answer has positive exponents. Lots of things going on here. A couple rules going on here, and here we're having to pay attention to where our positives and negatives are. Say we have like bases, so we add those. 9 plus negative 4 is 5. That one was nice because it's already positive. My answer's good. Same thing, applying a couple rules here. Like bases, subtract exponents. So I just have 11 to the first, or 11 would be the better answer. These always mess people up, so I'm taking negative 3 minus negative 7. Well, that becomes a plus. Negative 3 plus 7 gives me b to the 4th power. If you have to write it out to the side like this, do so. If you can do that in your head accurately, that's fine too. So same thing, this is like the last one, negative 3 minus negative 9. Those form a plus sign, that's 6, so n to the 6th power. Now we're on page 45 of the Got It. Pause the video and then check your answers. Okay, you subs should have paused the video, checking your answers, adding those. We get 3 to the negative 6th, which becomes 1 over 3 to the 6th. Subtracting, 2 minus 4 gives me negative 2, which gives me 1 over 11 squared. 9 plus negative 4 gives me n to the 5th. Negative 4 minus negative 7, there's my plus sign, so that's 3, so b to the 3rd. Okay, tear out page 47 in your book. Your homework is problems 1 through 17 the odd. Tear that out of your book, put your books away, and get further directions from the sub.